पितम येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम् वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरुन् वैष्णवंश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातां सहगना रघुनाथान्वितं तां सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्ण चैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपदान् सहगना ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कान्ता राधा कान्ता नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी श्रीराधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृष्णभानुसुतदेवे प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. So we'll be discussing chapter 9 verse 15 today. I share my screen. Okay, are you all able to see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, so let's recite this verse. You can repeat after me. Jnana yajnena chapyanye
Jnana yajnena chapyanye
yajanto mamupasate
yajanto mamupasate
ekatvena prataktvena
ekatvena prataktena
bahudha vishvato mukham
bahudha vishvato mukham
jnana yajnena chapyanye
Jnana yajnena chapyanye
yajanto mamupasate
yajanto mamupasate
ekatvena prataktvena bahudha vishvato mukham
bahudha vishvato mukham
jnana yajnena chapyanye
Jnana yajnena chapyanye
yajanto mamupasate
yajanto mamupasate
ekatvena prataktvena
ekatvena prataktvena
bahudha vishvato mukham.
bahudha vishvato mukham.
Anyone else would like to recite?
Jnana yajnena chapyanye
Jnana yajnena chapyanye
yajanto mamupasate
yajanto mamupasate
ekatvena prataktvena bahudha vishvato mukham
bahudha vishvato mukham.
Jnanena yajnena chapyanne
Jnana yajnena chapyanye
yajanto mam upasate
yajanto mamupasate
ekatvena prataktena
ekatvena prataktvena
bahudha vishvato mukham.
bahudha vishvato mukham. Anyone else would like to recite? Okay, so let's recite the synonyms. Jnana yajnena, by cultivation of knowledge.
By cultivation of knowledge.
Cha, also. Api, certainly. Anye, others. Yajantah, sacrificing. Mam, me. Upasate, worship. Ekatvena, in oneness. Prataktvena, in duality. Bahudha, in diversity. Vishvata mukham, and in the universal form. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Others who engage in sacrifice by the cultivation of knowledge worship the Supreme Lord as the one without a second, as diverse in many and in the universal form. Purport. This verse is the summary of the previous verses. The Lord tells Arjuna that those who are purely in Krishna consciousness and do not know anything other than Krishna are called Mahatma. Yet there are other persons who are not exactly in the position of Mahatma, but who worship Krishna also in different ways. Some of them have already been described as the distressed, the financially destitute, the inquisitive, and those who are engaged in the cultivation of knowledge. But there are others who are still lower, and these are divided into three. He who worships himself as one with the Supreme Lord, he who concocts some form of the Supreme Lord and worships that, and he who accepts the universal form, the Vishwarupa of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and worships that. Out of the above three, the lowest, those who worship themselves as the Supreme Lord, thinking themselves to be monists, the most predominant, are most predominant. Such people think themselves to be the Supreme Lord, and in this mentality they worship themselves. This is also a type of God worship, for they can understand that they are not the material body but are actually spiritual soul. At least such a sense is prominent. Generally, the impersonalists worship the Supreme Lord in this way. The second class includes the worshippers of the demigods, those who by imagination consider any form to be the form of the Supreme Lord. And the third class includes those who cannot conceive of anything beyond the manifestation of this material universe. They consider the universe to be the supreme organism or entity and worship that. The universe is also a form of the Lord. नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्ण पृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामिनीति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे. I'll read the translation one more time. Others who engage in sacrifice by the cultivation of knowledge worship the Supreme Lord as the one without a second, as diverse in many and in the universal form. So this verse is like a sutra. It's like a formula to really understand what Krishna had described in the previous verses and what he's going to speak in the next few verses. So as we have been discussing the 9th chapter, and in the 9th chapter, Krishna first tells his relationship with the material world, and which is inconceivable. So you may remember the verses that Krishna had spoken. What is it? Maya tatamidam sarvam jagadavyakta murtina matstani sarvabhutani na chaham tesho avasana. So the point is that he is situated in the universe and he is not situated. The living beings are situated in him and they are not situated in him. Matstani sarvabhutani. The next verse he says nacha matstani bhutani. And then how is it possible? How is it that the living entities are situated yet they are not situated in the or the Lord is situated in the living entities and yet he is not situated? So in the next verse he gives an example. Yatha matstani bhutani. He says yatha akashito nityam vayu sarvatra gomahan tatha sarvani bhutani matstani tupadharya. So the point is that his relationship with with the material world is inconceivable. He is situated yet he is not situated. He maintains the living entities yet he is not burdened by maintaining the living entities. So and then he finally concludes the description of his relationship with the material world in 9.10, where he says maya adhyakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam hetunanena konteya jagad viparivartate. Under my supervision this material universe is working. So the point is that the Lord is supervising. He is in one sense overseeing whatever is happening in the material world. So because his relationship with the material world is inconceivable, different people understand him in different ways. So first, Krishna talked about those people who completely get him wrong. They just can't conceive. Their understanding is completely incorrect. So he uses the word mudha for that. He says avajananti ma mudha manushim tanumashita. So avajananti. So there are three words: jananti, ajananti, and avajananti. So jananti means to know. Ajananti means to not know, and avajananti means to know the opposite of what is true. There's one thing that you may ask me some question and I will say, I don't know, I have no idea about this. That is ajananti. And avajananti means I know something which is opposite of what is actually true. So avajananti ma mudha manushim tanumashita. So their idea of uh, uh, the Supreme Lord is completely incorrect. So we'll talk more about it when we discuss the Ekatvena, the Gyan Yagyena and the Ekatvena, which is described in this verse 9.15. But after describing people who completely get him wrong, then Krishna talks about those people who get him perfectly right. Their conclusion is perfect. There is no problem. And then he uses the word Mahatma for those people. Mahatmanas tumam partha devim prakritim ashrita bhajante ananya manaso gyatva bhutadim avyayam. So these people are Mahatmas, and they understand Krishna to be Gyatva. They understand Bhutadi and Avyayam. Bhutadi means he is the Lord of all living entities, and Avyayam means he is imperishable. So that is their understanding. And then what do? They bhajante ananya manaso. They worship Krishna with all the emotions of their heart. Ananya. Ananya means Anya means other, Ananya means no one else. So they worship no one else but Krishna. So that is their, their activity. And then further Krishna talks about them. He says, Satatam kirtayantam mam yatantasya dridvata namasyantasya mam bhaktya nitya yukta upasate. That they always worship me, they do my kirtan always, Satatam. So that's how 9.14 ended, and now Krishna talks about those people who are partially correct. They are not incorrect, they are not correct, but they are partially correct. So there are multiple categories which Krishna talks about, and Krishna is going to elaborate on these categories in the future verses that he is going to speak now. So Gyana Yagyena Chapyanye. So Gyana Yagya is the sacrifice of knowledge, and Cha Anye, and by other means. What do? They do Yajanto Mam Upasate. They worship me only. And what are the different categories of people who worship him through Gyan Yagya and other methods? He says Ekatvena. Ekatvena, Prabhupada explains that those people who worship themselves as God, so that is Aham Rupupasna. And then Prathaktvena Bahudha. Prathaktvena Bahudha basically is the worship of different demigods. So there are two categories within this, Prathaktvena Bahudha. So this is explained by Chakravarti Pad in his commentary. So he mentions that there are one category of demigod worshippers who think that, okay, there are many different gods and they consider one of them to be the supreme and they worship that particular person. And the second category is Pratikopasna. Pratikopasna is that category of people who understand that different demigods are actually representative of one supreme Lord. They, like for example, Surya, they will understand, they might worship Surya, but they understand that Surya is not supreme, but he is one of the representative of the supreme Lord. So that is Pratikopasna, and that worship, that kind of worship will help them to make progress on the spiritual path. But people who worship a particular demigod as supreme, for them there is no hope. Krishna will talk about it later, in the future verses. And then Vishwato Mukham. Vishwato Mukham is the worship of universe as God. So these people, they don't really consider that there is a particular person who is God. So they consider the whole universe as divine, and they understand that this universe itself is God. It takes care of all our needs, and it basically, there is no need for a separate God for it. So this kind of a understanding is sometimes also referred as pantheism. Pantheism means everything that we see is God, everything is divine. So this is universe. So Krishna says that, okay, actually this will consider universe as God, but universe is actually me only. That's how Krishna will explain later in the upcoming verses. He's going to talk about it. Now let's go a little deeper into this. So Gyan Yagya. So Gyan Yagya Chakravarti Pad explains that within this, again, there are two categories. So it is not wrong to say that that I am Krishna, but it is not 100% correct also, because if I am part and parcel of Krishna, I am also Krishna in one way, but I am, just as part and parcel. I cannot be the whole Krishna. I cannot become whole. The part will always remain the part. That's how Krishna also puts it in the 15th chapter, 7th verse. He says, Mamayivamsho Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. He uses the word Sanatana, that these are my parts and particles and they will remain like that eternally, Sanatana. So we'll eternally remain the part. We will never become the whole. So being a part and parcel of Krishna, we are also Krishna. And in that sense, they are partially correct. But if they consider that they can become Krishna, that becomes a problem. So Jnana Yagya, Chakravarti Pad explains that, only those impersonalists who are not offensive to the personal form of the Lord, they are actually doing Jnana Yagya and they will make progress. But those people who are offensive to the form of the Lord, to the transcendental form of the Lord, they are not doing Jnana Yagya. So that is what was described in 9.11 actually, Avajananti Mamudha. How? So if you really see the flow of the verses that come from 9.10 onwards, so first Krishna describes that, under my supervision, this Prakriti is working, Mayadhyakshena Prakriti Suyate Sacharacharam Hetunanena Konteya Jagad Viparivartate. That under my supervision, this is happening. But what happens is these Mayavadis understand that, the Prakriti is not under Krishna, Krishna is under Prakriti. So they consider Krishna's form to be a product of Maya. We have discussed this. I'm not going to put a lot of stress on this point. I just briefly mentioned that how these, what is the real understanding of, what exactly is Mayavad and how is it different from the Brahmavad. Brahmavad is actually Jnana Yagya and Mayavad is not Jnana Yagya, because these people are offensive to the form of the Lord. So their understanding is that when the Nirgun Nirakar Brahma, when it comes in contact of the material mode of goodness, then it comes down as an avatar, and they call it as Saguna Brahman. And their idea is that this Saguna Brahman has no lasting existence. After its work is done here in the material world, it will go back and merge into Brahman. That is their idea. So their idea is that the form is actually an impurity. So when the Brahman comes in contact of material mode of goodness, because it is matter, material mode of goodness, therefore it's an impurity, and that form comes down as Saguna Brahman. So this is actually opposite of what Krishna had said previously. In 9.10, he had said, Maya Adhyakshena Prakriti, that the Prakriti is working under me. I am not working under Prakriti. And Krishna has also said this in the 7th chapter, if you remember. He had said, Mama Maya Duratya, that Maya is my energy, and it is very difficult to overcome. So repeatedly, Krishna had mentioned that, this Prakriti is under Krishna, Krishna is not under Prakriti. But their understanding is completely incorrect. Therefore, Krishna used the word Avajananti Mamudha. Avajananti means to know the opposite of what is true, because he comes in a human-like form. They understand that, this form is actually a material impurity, and they understand that this form has no lasting existence. And therefore, Krishna says, when he is talking about the devotees, in the next verse, in 9.13, he says that their understanding is, that I am Avyayam. Avyayam means his form doesn't perish. He never perishes. So Avyayam. So, and what happens to these people, if what is the consequence of having an incorrect understanding of Krishna? It's very scary, actually. He puts it in the next verse, 9.12, he talks about it. He says, Mohasha Mogha Karmano Mogha Jnana Vichetasa Rakshasim Asurim Chaiva Prakritim Mohinim Shitaha. This is the verse that Pyari Prabhu had discussed. Let me open this verse. Excuse me. Yeah, this is the verse. Moghasha Mogha Karmano Mogha Jnana Vichetasa Rakshasim Asurim Chaiva Prakritim Mohinim Shitaha. So Mogh Asha, Mog Asha means, so let me read the translation. Those who are thus bewildered are attracted by demonic and atheistic views. In that deluded condition, their hopes for liberation, their fruitive activities, and their culture of knowledge are all defeated. So Moghasha, actually, if we see Chakravarti Pal's explanation of this, he says that Mogha Jnana refers to Jnanis who are aspiring for liberation in Brahman. Mogha Karmano refers to people who are on the path of karma, the karmis. And Mogha Asha, this is interesting. He says this refers to bhaktas. So what will happen if they don't understand Krishna? If they have incorrect understanding of Krishna, all their their aspirations will be mogha. Mogha means they will be baffled. They will never attain this. So what does it mean that devotees, so there are even certain devotees, they are doing bhakti, but their understanding of Krishna is not right. There is also an example of this, which comes in Chaitanya Charitamrita. So we have Ramadas Vishwas. Anyone remembers the pastime of Ramadas Vishwas? Have you heard about him?
I don't remember.
Okay, so Ramdas Vishwas, I think Omyo Prabhu might know. Omyo Prabhu, do you remember?
No, Prabhu, never heard.
Okay, so Ramdas Vishwas is actually, he is chanting the names of Lord Ram very fervently, and chanting is actually a limb of bhakti. He's chanting the names very fervently, and so fervently that even Raghunath Das Goswami is impressed. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu doesn't pay any attention to him because he understands. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is also the Paramatma in the heart. He understands, this devotee actually wants to become Ram. He thinks that by chanting the names of Lord Ram, I can become. So he had a little Mayavadi kind of understanding of. So these kind of devotees, their hopes will be baffled. Similarly, the Jnanis, their hopes will also be baffled, and even the Karmis who are on the path of Karma Kand, their hopes will also be baffled. And something more scary, he says, Rakshasim Asurim Chaiva Prakritim Mohinim Shritaha. They will acquire the Prakriti of Rakshasi and Asuri Prakriti, they will acquire. So what does it mean, Rakshasi and Asuri Prakriti? It basically refers to the mode of passion and ignorance. So Asuras are in the mode of passion and Rakshasas are in the mode of ignorance. So assuming their Prakriti means they will come under the influence of the mode of passion and ignorance. And because of that, they will further go down. They will not make progress. They will go down. So that is the understanding. That is what happens, if you have incorrect understanding of Krishna. So Jnana Yagya, as we were discussing, it refers to, again, two different kinds of, Prabhupada also explains this, two different kinds of transcendentalists. One are the Mayavadis, and the other is Brahmavadis. So the Brahmavadis, again, that will be discussed later in the 12th chapter, where Arjuna will ask the question, Evam satata yuktaye bhaktastam paryupasate ye chapte aksharam avyaktam tesham ke yoga vittamah. That, out of the devotees who worship your personal form and those who worship your impersonal form, who are better? So there Krishna talks about the Brahmavadis. So he has no, he doesn't condemn it, of course, but he says that this path is very difficult. And in fact, in Srimad Bhagavatam, in the 11th canto, in the Uddhav Gita, there is a full chapter on Brahmavad, and there is no condemnation over there. Krishna talks elaborately about the process of Jnana Yagya over there. So this is about what exactly is Jnana Yagya here, and how it is different for two different classes of transcendentalists. Then, so Ekatvena, again, it refers to those who worship themselves, and themselves could be Mayavadis, or it could be the Brahmavadis. Then Prathaktvena Bahudha. Prathaktvena Bahudha is the demigod worshippers. So we were discussing that there are two kinds of demigod worship. One is where a person thinks of one particular demigod to be the supreme and he worships him. And the second is the Pratikopasna. Pratikopasna is he understands that this demigod, or what the different demigods which are there, they are just in charge of different things. They are representative of the one supreme Lord. So Krishna had talked about this in the 7th chapter, Yo yo yam yam tanum bhaktam shraddha architam ichchati tasya tasya chalam shraddham tame vididamyaham. So he actually said that whoever wants to worship whichever form, actually I give them the faith to worship that form. And further he says that, not only that, when they ask for something from their worshipable demigod, I actually empower that demigod to fulfill their asks or demands or prayers or whatever you may call it. So that is a system that is done by Krishna only. And in that sense, later in the 14th chapter, Krishna also mentions that those who worship the demigods, they are yajante satvikan devan. So people who worship the demigods, who worship the devas, they are they are in the mode of goodness. They sattvic, they are. So again, it's not the highest, but it is not recommended also. So right in this chapter, 9th chapter, later when Krishna talks about the problems with the demigod worship, he will say it. Now, what is the problem with this kind of demigod worship? Although it's not condemned, but it's not recommended also. So Krishna says that yepi anya devta bhakta yajanto shraddhayanvitaha tepi mam eva kaunteya yajante avidhi purvakam. That all the people who worship the different demigods, they are worshipping me only, but they are worshipping avidhi purvakam. They are worshipping me incorrectly. And what is the avidhi purvakam? Krishna explains in the next verse. He says, aham hi sarva yajnanam bhukta cha prabhureva cha natumaham abhijanati tyatvenatas chavantite. He says that aham hi sarva yajnanam bhukta cha prabhureva cha. I am only the enjoyer and the Lord of all sacrifices. And those who don't understand this, what will happen to them? Chavantite, they will fall down. Fall down in the sense, they will remain in this material world. They will not be able to attain anything beyond this material world. So again, the point is that they will get temporary results. They might get Swarga or whatever, but again, they will have to keep going up and down, up and down, up and down. It's like, as Pyari Prabhu explains, that this is like that merry-go-round. Sometimes they go up, then they come down. They go up, then they go down. So that is Prathaktvena Bahudha and Vishwato Mukham. Vishwato Mukham is the worship of the universe, and worshipping universe as the God. And Krishna will show that actually the universal form is not independent of Krishna. It is actually a part of Krishna only. So Arjuna will request that I want to see that opulent form of yours by which you maintain or you sustain this universe. Now I want to see. And then Krishna will say, okay, you see this form. So Krishna will show that form also. And also in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Virat Rupa is described. Now interestingly, there is a Virat Rupa and there is a Vishwa Rupa. So what is the difference between the two? So Virat Rupa is the terminology used by Bhagavatam, and Vishwarupa is the terminology used by Bhagavad Gita. Actually, the Vishwarupa only comes once in the 11th chapter. The word Vishwarupa comes only once in the 11th chapter, where Arjuna says Vishwamurte, that you are the form of this universe. So Virat Rupa is actually an imagined form. When Shukdev Goswami describes the Virat Rupa, he says Kalpitaha. Kalpitaha means this is our imagined form. Imagined form means that when a particular person who is, in a sense, not atheist, he is a theist, but he considers that this universe itself is God, is divine. So they imagine that how the supreme this universe is like the form of that supreme Lord. So in the Srimad Bhagavatam, when it is described, it is mentioned that the trees are like the hairs on the body of the Lord, the sun and the moon are the eyes of the Lord, like that. Different, the veins are like the rivers. So that is actually Virat Rupa, which is an imagined form, whereas Vishwarupa is a mystical form shown by Krishna to Arjuna. So it's not imagined, it is actually Krishna had shown this form to Arjuna. So that is exactly the difference between the Virat Rupa and the Vishwarupa. So these are not the same. Sometimes people think that Vishwarupa and Virat Rupa are the same, but there is a technical difference over there. So that is this is what this verse basically talks about. Now Krishna is going to elaborate further. So first he will describe how this universe is his form. So those verses will come now. I think 9.16 to 20 is Krishna's description of how this universe is actually his form only. But before we go there, are there any questions or comments or corrections or any realizations? Anyone would like to add anything?
I was just thinking when you were saying that, yes, you were saying we are part and parcel of Krishna. So in a sense, the impersonalists want to make themselves God, even though we are infinitesimal. But nonetheless, we are part and parcel of Krishna. So that is of great significance, right?
Yeah, actually, Prabhupada says this in one of the purports. Let me, interesting that you brought this point. Let me show that. In this chapter only, he says it.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And this morning we were talking about the spark of Krishna's glory is still glorious, So we can just imagine how glorious he is,
Yeah, but you can continue. I'll just look up. Mataji.
Mhm. So the only thing is we have the tendency to contaminate because we are infinitesimal, and that is what has brought us into this material world. But otherwise.
Yeah, let me share my screen. I found this. This is 9.17. Prabhupada writes in the purport. This is Pitahamasya Jagato Mata Dhata Pitamaha. That's how Krishna puts himself. Are you able to see my screen?
It's coming through. Yeah.
Okay, so here, as such, these living entities who appear to be our father, mother, etc., are nothing but Krishna. In this verse, the word Dhata means creator. Not only are our father and mother parts and parcels of Krishna, but the creator, grandmother and grandfather, etc., are also Krishna. So Prabhupada is, so much against Mayavad, but he's so opposed to Mayavad. But this purport is sensational. But actually, he clarifies then. He says, actually, any living entity being part and parcel of Krishna is Krishna. So the point is that we are part and parcel. In that sense, we are Krishna.
Right, but just a spark. But even a spark is glorious.
Right. Exactly.
Yes.
So this is the clarification that any living entity being part and parcel of Krishna is Krishna. So if we understand like this, then there is no problem. But if we think that no, we are fully Krishna and there is no difference between me and Krishna, then there is a problem. So actually, Aham Brahmasmi, Prabhupada says that Aham Brahmasmi is true, but it is incomplete understanding. He says that okay, Aham Brahmasmi, but the full understanding is that Jivara Swarupa Krishna Nitya Das. So we are eternal servants of Krishna. So that is the full understanding of yeah.
Well, that is our deviance. This morning Srila Prabhupada's purport said, Krishna is the enjoyer, but we want to enjoy a little. Everything should be used in Krishna's service, but we want to exploit, a little.
Yeah.
So that's our problem, and we can see it on an everyday basis after reading that purport this morning.
Which verse was that, Mate?
That was
Which
10.1.
Okay.
But Srila Prabhupada had given a lecture on it,
Right. Yeah, it's
so
an interesting verse.
Yeah, it wasn't even in the purport, it was in his lecture.
Okay.
And he was saying that, that is our propensity. That is what has brought us to this material world. And I can see that on an everyday basis, like we want to, we don't want to give everything to Krishna and just think of Krishna's enjoyment. We're thinking of our enjoyment too a little bit, We're not giving everything, considering everything as belonging to Krishna. We are exploiting it a little bit also, So that mentality is so very hard to overcome,
Very true, Mataji. That verse is also very sweet, actually. The way Krishna puts it across to Arjuna, Bhuya eva mahabaho shanume paramam vachaha yatteham priyamanaya vakshyami hitkamya. For your benefit, I am speaking, Arjuna.
Yeah.
So hear this from
because you're my dear friend and because you have
Right.
submitted to me, that also, he has.
Exactly.
Srila Prabhupada says in the lecture that, what's that? Shishyasteham sadhyadimam tamvam prapannam, because you've submitted to me, and because you're a dear friend, And then he made a very interesting point about the Mahabaho part also. He says, we are also Baho, but he's Mahabaho.
Right.
But he also says that we can consider ourselves Mahabaho. And Srila Prabhupada says this, that we have to fight Maya with determination and strength, and then we become Mahabaho, he says. So he uses like an analogy of how we can also become Mahabaho, he says heroes that are fighting Maya with strength and determination. But everything easier said than done,
Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, true.
Yeah, I have a question, Prabhu. You mentioned that the group of people who worship worship certain demigods and think one demigod is the supreme, that those group of people has no hope of advancing. Am I correct?
Not on the spiritual, not on the spiritual path. So Krishna says, Yanti Deva Vrita Devan, Putran Yanti Pitrata. So he says basically those who worship the demigods go and live with the demigods. Those who worship the Bhutas and the Rakshasas, they live with the Bhutas and Rakshasas, and those who worship me, they live with me. So if you live with the demigods, it's not spiritual in any sense. It's material only because you're in the material world. And the point is that once your pious karma or activities are finished, then you have to come back again to the material world, to this same planet, and suffer here again. Yeah, but what's your question, Prabhu? Go ahead.
Yes, Prabhu. So if my understanding is correct, so then I was thinking, Krishna is Bhagavad Gita, he said he's Shurid, he's our dearest friend, right?
Right. Suradam Sarva Bhutana.
Exactly. So say if you consider me as your friend, then if you see me getting downward, you should help me out. But here we see that we in our Chaitanya Charitamrita class yesterday we discussed a little bit, I never read those Puranas. Like for example, Bhagavad Puran says Krishna is the supreme. If you read the Devi Puran, it will say Ma Durga is the supreme. If you read Shiv Puran, it will say Lord Shiva is the supreme. So either we say, okay, those Puranas are not authentic, or we say, why is Krishna confusing us? He's our Shurid, so he should help us, guide us properly.
So your question is, why is that so, right? If Krishna is Suradam Sarva Bhutana. Okay, so there is a book that is written by Satyaraj Prabhu. The name of the book is Essential Hinduism. This basically covers the basics of Hinduism. He writes an interesting point over there. He says that actually Hinduism, or the Vedic religion, it offers user-friendly spirituality. So what is user-friendly spirituality means? That the idea is that everybody is at a different level. Not everybody is at the highest level. Everybody has their own level. Some people are prominent in the mode of ignorance. Some people are prominent in the mode of passion. And some are prominent in the mode of goodness. But the problem is, there could be some people who are like that, but mostly people they have a mixture of these three gunas within them. And as Krishna explains later in the 14th chapter, sometimes the passion becomes strong, sometimes ignorance becomes strong sometimes. So the point is that everybody is at different level. Now, why does different scripture talk about different people, different deities to be supreme? That's also an interesting point. So because these people are at different levels, there are different scriptures are meant for people who are in the mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. So this categorization of which Puranas are in the mode of passion, which Puranas are in the mode of goodness, and which Puranas are in the mode of ignorance, this categorization is given in the Kurma Purana. There is a verse that comes, I don't remember it, but I can share it later. I can find it out and share it with you. And also in the Linga Puran, there is a conversation that comes between Lord Shiva and Kartikeya. So this exact question is asked by Kartikeya to Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva replies that actually, yes, there are discrepancies, and you can accept the other Puranas to be true as long as they are in accordance with the Sattvic Puranas, with the Vishnu Purana. Not the Vishnu Purana, it uses a special word which refers to the Sattvic Purana. I'm missing the word, but I can share that verse also with you. So the point is that, if you're doing a comparative analysis, always the Sattvic Puranas will take precedence. But because different people are at different levels, different scriptures are meant for them. And, because so as to attract their consciousness, the things are presented in that way which will attract them. And then within the Vedic literature, what happens is there are two forces that are active. One force is that the Vedic literature, they try to take the practitioner one step forward. Wherever you are, even if you are a adharmi, you are you're most sinful. It will at least try to bring you at the level of dharma. So like that, if you're at the level of dharma already, then it will take you further ahead, like that. One step they will take you. And the second force that is active in the Vedic scriptures is that it will try to take you right to the topmost also. So there are glimpses mentioned. All the Puranas talk about the supremacy of Vishnu in some way or the other. Some Puranas mention in a more hidden way. Some Puranas mention it very prominently. Very clearly they will mention. But again, because the focus of those scriptures is to take these people, let these people make progress, therefore they present things in that way. For example, in the Bhagavad Puran, if you really read, there is this confrontation between Indra and Vritrasur that is given. And if you read the Bhagavad Puran, the way it is described is, and actually Vritrasur is the real hero, and Indra is no match for Vritrasur. And Vritrasur, even Indra doesn't have the heart to kill Vritrasur, but Vritrasur is actually encouraging Indra to kill him so that he can be liberated and go back to Krishna. But if you read the same description that is given in the Vedas, so the hero of the Vedas is Indra, because the focus of Vedas is to take the practitioner to Swarga, and Swarga is actually the jurisdiction of Indra. So there, if you read the Vedas, the same description that comes, the same fight that happens between Indra and Vritrasur, it is presented from the other side, that how Indra is the real hero and he is throwing these weapons and smashing Vritrasur and killing Vritrasur, like that it is mentioned. So the focus is different, the audience are different, and that's why things are presented in different ways. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yes, Prabhu. It does, but is to meditate more, Prabhu. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, if you really if someone is worshipping a particular demigod, if you just go to them and just tell them, and you can try this actually, we have tried it. Tell them that are you foolish? You should worship Krishna. Krishna says this in the Bhagavad Gita. Tell them like this and see what their reaction is. You can try it out. And not everybody can really understand what is mentioned, what is the highest level, and therefore they have to make a gradual progress. So
and
Krishna also,
Prabhupada even says you shouldn't disturb them too much.
Exactly. And Krishna also actually understands this. He says bahunam janmanam ante gyanman bam prapadyate. After many births they will realize that Vasudeva sarvamiti. So it's a gradual progress that happens. It's a multi-life journey to reach to the final destination. So we can say we are fortunate that we, in this life, at least we got a chance, at least we got the understanding of that Krishna is supreme.
And if you read books like Devi Mahatmya and all that, it makes you look like as if Devi can give you everything, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But in one sense, it's still talking about materialistic things, but people who are into that do not understand that,
Right.
that it is on the material level,
But
Prabhu, that it is not
say,
the highest benefit.
Yes, Mataji. But here's my point. Like, see, like I also, from my childhood, like, the part of Bengal we are from, like, we used to worship Mother Saraswati because we are student, But I mean, I was also told Krishna is the supreme, Saraswati is his power. So, I mean, what I'm saying, I was worshiping, Mother Durga during Durga Puja, So I mean,
we all were, Omeo.
Yeah,
we all were, yeah.
Yes, I mean, so what I'm saying is that even like right now in my altar, I mean, I don't want to remove Mother Saraswati. My Saraswati is there, but what I'm trying to say is like I also know that like Krishna is the supreme. So what I'm saying is that like, I can like Mother Saraswati. I can be her devotee. But that doesn't mean that I don't have to know that Krishna is the supreme. So what I'm saying is that like I see you as my mentor. I mean, you can say whatever you like. At the end, I mean, my final reference should be my scripture. So the reason that you mentioned, if I go to a Lord Shiva's devotee and say, hey, Krishna is the supreme, why should he accept that? He would, if I was him, I would say, okay, what's the proof that Krishna is the supreme? You
But who is
consider.
making him accept? Even Krishna himself doesn't force us to accept
No,
his
no, no.
words.
I'm not forcing. I'm saying, like, say I went to a Lord Shiva's devotee, say, hey, Krishna is the supreme. Then he would say, how do you know? Then I will say, because Bhagavad Puran said Krishna is the supreme, and then he will say, okay, Bhagavad Puran is like another Puran. If you read Lord Shiv Puran, you'll see Shiva is the supreme. So why should I accept Bhagavad Puran as, like, the most authoritative versus Shiv Puran?
Yeah,
You
so
will accept it according to each person's understanding, Omio, I mean, every person understands. Srila Prabhupada even told people, like, if you're a Mohammedan, if you're a Christian, if you're a whatever, if you're a Shiva Bhakta, I think it goes for those things too. He said, sincerely try to reach out to God. You know what I'm saying? If you're really, the sincerity is the key. If you're really, really sincere, Krishna himself will lead you eventually to the supreme truth. That's my understanding, at least. You were saying something, Ganapati Govind.
yeah, and other thing is, it's not always a matter of intellectually understanding that, oh, okay, Krishna is supreme and all. It is also a matter of heart. It's a matter of faith also. So we have got faith in someone, and it's not easy to take that faith away from us. And in fact, Krishna says that I give that faith. So this faith was given by Krishna only, in one sense. So in that sense, we have to understand that, okay, you can try to tell them, and you don't have to really be very blunt, or don't try to chastise them and all, because Krishna says that this is a system that I have only established, the system of worshipping the demigods. So if Krishna has established it, then there would have been some thought behind it. He says it clearly in the 7th chapter, yo yam yam tanum bhaktam shraddha architam ichchati tasya achalam shraddham tam eva vididhamyaham, that I give that faith in their heart to worship the different forms, because that is what they want to do. That is at the level at what they are. So he is letting people, come to a level ahead of, make gradual progress. So we can't expect everybody to make rapid progress. And
I think, Prabhuji, there are practical examples, like people who worship the highest truth, worship Krishna, do not go backwards. But people who worship Shiva, or people who worship Durga, or, all of them, they go through progression, and then they cross that and they go beyond that. But it's like, it's like the impersonalists and the personalists. Once you have a personal understanding, you don't go backwards. There's not a single example where a personalist has become an impersonalist. But even in Shastra, we have the 4 Kumaras. We have so many people who were impersonalists before, and then later they became personalists. So once you have the highest understanding, you don't go, because Kalasudha Mataji was telling in her Bhakti Vriksha, she gave a practical example. There was one woman who came in and she said, I'm a very staunch Shiva Bhakta, it's a woman, Bhakti, that I'm never going to come and worship Krishna. So what is the point of joining your Bhakti Vriksha? So I'm not going to join. But she said, it's okay. You can, I'm not saying to stop being worshipping Shiva, but come anyway. We're serving prasad, you'll have some company, you'll have some people. So why don't you just come to my house once a week? And it was a social thing. And she wanted some society. She wanted some people. So you'll get some good intellectual company. So why don't you come? But after a few years, now she leads a Bhakti Vriksha now. So slowly she got the understanding, and Lord Shiva himself is Vaishnava Yata Shambhu. He is the highest Vaishnava. So if you sincerely worship Lord Shiva will give you that understanding, not even Krishna. Shiva himself will lead you to Krishna. If you really, really, really want spiritual understanding. If you just want some material benediction, yes, Ashutosh, will give you whatever you want and get rid of you. Like, okay, leave me alone, take whatever you want and go. But if you really approach Shiva with spiritual, lalasa, like having that yearning for spirituality, he will lead you to Krishna. So once you reach Krishna, then you don't go backwards. But all those demigods, if you sincerely worship them, then they will lead you to Krishna. That's my understanding.
that's very true, Mataji. I completely agree with that.
Yeah, and I think in the Brihad Bhagavatamritam, it even says that if you are sincerely worshipping Shiva just for worshipping Shiva, not for material things, that he can actually give you liberation. It says in Brihad Bhagavatamritam. I was surprised to read that.
So Prabhu, when you preach, like, I'm sure you ever come across a lot of, like, Shaivas. So what do you tell them if someone asks you the same question? That based on what you are saying, Krishna is the supreme.
Based on Bhagavad Gita. So actually, if you want to, so there are two things, Prabhuji. One is if you are having a debate with someone, it's an intellectual debate and they are trying to put you down and, you have to intellectually argue with them. Then it's a different thing. And then you can use Bhagavad Gita. There are verses, there is no other scripture where a person is saying that I am the supreme. Nowhere in none of the scriptures, Lord Shiva himself says that I am the supreme. There would be scriptures who might have there are two different personalities talking and one person is saying that Shiva is supreme or Devi is supreme, but nowhere you will find that Shiva is himself saying that I am the supreme. But here in the Bhagavad Gita, this is the only place, only scripture where there is a person who is declaring himself to the Supreme Lord. And then there are very powerful verses, mattaha partaram na anyat kinchit asti dhananjaya, there is no truth superior to me. So you can use those verses and you can argue. But if it is not a debate, if it is just you want to bring a person to Krishna, then you don't actually first put them down in whatever they are doing. That's not how it is to be done. And Krishna also says this in I believe that is verse 3.26, na buddhi bhedam janayed agyanam karma sanginam joshayet sarva karmani vidwan yukta samacharan. That do not disrupt the minds of ignorant men attached to different either fruitive activities or different demigods. You have to gradually bring them. So you have to create a bridge. Like Mataji was just explaining that this Mataji initially she completely said no, I don't want to come. And in fact, I used to worship some other personality earlier before coming to ISKCON, and gradually that faith builds and you can come. I'm sure most of us would have been worshipping coming from India. There are so many different kinds of worship in India. So it is a gradual process, and what happens is when we come in the contact of devotees, when the association is there, when we eat prasad in their company, and when we chant the names of the Lord, then slowly that transformation of heart happens in the heart. So there are two different strategies. One is when you're arguing or having a debate, that's a different thing. Then you can use Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam kind of scriptures, and you can debate with them. And if you really want to get into a serious debate, then you can read the Krishna Sandarbha of Jiva Goswami, where he gives very, very strong arguments from different scriptures. He gives a parade of verses from different Vedas and Puranas, and he very systematically establishes Krishna as the supreme. Then nobody can actually, if you use those verses, nobody can actually fight with you like that. But again, this intellectual debates are different from when you have to give someone faith. That's not how you give faith. Then they will be more offended with you if you really put them down in that way. So that will happen over a period of time.
And yesterday, Rupanuga Prabhu gave Omiya Prabhu a nice example, didn't he, Omiya Prabhu?
Yes, he did. Yes.
Yeah,
but I was satisfied at that time, but then I got like, okay.
I know. So the example was like Omiya Prabhu was saying that in some of the Puranas, even like Lord Ram is bowing down to Krishna, Shiva, or somebody higher than Shiva or Ganesha is praising them as great, And Rupanuga Prabhu gave a great example yesterday in one of the RCC classes. He said if Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati were to manifest himself, like right now, he might say like, he did not go outside of India but he wanted Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message to be propagated all over the world. And he might say like, Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada has propagated this all over the world. He has done more than me. He's greater than me. I bow down to him, and we can actually envision him saying that. But that doesn't mean that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati is, I mean, Srila Prabhupada would ever consider himself greater than Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, you know. So he said some of the Puranas, it might look like as if, you know, other Krishna, you know, Krishna or Ram is bowing down to Lord Shiva, but doesn't mean that, you know, Shiva is greater than Lord Ram, you know. I mean, and he even gave an example. I mean, Lord, Shiva is also known as Ramnath, you know, he did worship him, you know, as his devotee, you know, as his greatest devotee. So there are so many examples where it might look like those people in the Puranas are being praised as the highest deity, but they're not, you know. It's like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati might say, I bow down to you because you have propagated this all over the world. But it doesn't mean, you know, he might say that out of his humility and out of his praise for Srila Prabhupada, but it doesn't mean that Srila Prabhupada would ever consider himself greater than Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati.
Yeah, I had asked a question in one of the classes that in the Krishna book, there is a place where Lord Krishna with Arjuna goes to see Lord Vishnu when he steals the children of the Brahmanas, you know, the 10 children get stolen. And then finally, Arjuna says, I'll get, you know the entire story. And so I said, why should Krishna and Arjuna go to see Vishnu? Shouldn't Vishnu be coming to seeing Krishna? Shouldn't it be backwards? And he said, yes, you know, in one sense, you cannot say that Vishnu is greater than Krishna based on that. And he gave an example. He said, when we want our Guru Maharajas to come to our house and, you know, like we're having a program and we want our Guru Maharajas to come, they're definitely far greater than us. But instead of, we do go and see Guru Maharaj wherever he is. But sometimes we want Guru Maharaj to come to our house and we want to host them and do something special for them. So it's like that, you know, Lord Vishnu wants to see Krishna and he wants to, you know, kind of have Krishna as his guest. And that's why he invites, you know. So just because Krishna and Arjuna are going to see Lord Vishnu doesn't mean Vishnu is greater than Krishna. You know, he gave that example, you know, when we want our spiritual masters to come to our house, does that mean we are greater than the spiritual master? We should be approaching them, but sometimes we are inviting them to our house, you know. So like that, it can be backwards too.
Yeah, and Jiva Goswami explains this, why Krishna goes there and the discussion that happens. I don't exactly remember, but he puts it in proper context and gives proper references from different shastras also about this pastime. But coming back to what Mataji was saying, Kitamala Mataji, that, you know, sometimes in the other Puranas we see that different, you know, even Lord Ram is worshipping someone, or even in the Bhagavad Puran we have such a pastime where Krishna is washing the feet of Sudama. You know, Krishna is the supreme Lord, and all the deities are going down and he is washing the feet
So
of
it doesn't
Sudama.
mean that Sudama is greater
Right.
than Krishna.
It doesn't mean that, we have to see the context, and you know, Sudama is a Brahman, you know, Krishna is Go Brahman Hitayacha. And interestingly, the same Srimad Bhagavatam, it is also mentioned that Lord Balram kills a Brahman, you know, he kills Rom Harshana. So,
no,
you know,
and Krishna considers his devotees as greater than him. You know
right.
what I'm saying? He does, he genuinely does. You know?
Yeah, so we have to see in what context it is mentioned, and you know, so there's a lot of things to be considered. We just can't take one thing and take it out of context and say that because Ram is worshipping him or Krishna is washing the feet of Sudama, therefore this person has to be the supreme. So, okay, I think we can end here. We have exceeded the time. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining.
When we are discussing, we always exceed the time.
Yeah. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Ananta koti Vaishnavavrinda ki jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Ganapati Govind Prabhu ki jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, everyone.